All right, welcome to episode 3 of WMPEDS-Live. It's a rainy Thursday afternoon, so thanks for joining us. We have a great show in store today. We have two guests, our very own Dr. Hartman. Hello, Dr. Hartman.
Hello, and I'm not the main guest here, believe me.
You are a special guest, but there's an even more special guest that we'll introduce just in a minute. We just have a couple of housekeeping things I just want to get to real quick. First of all, we sent out a survey last weekend. Thank you very much for filling that out. We got a lot of great responses. And one of the questions that we asked was what time is best, and the overwhelming response was 7 to 8 on Thursdays. So we're just going to continue doing this time. And the other thing is we got a bunch of responses about topics that you want to see in the future, and we're putting those together to see what the most popular ones are. And those are things that we're definitely going to get to probably in the next couple of weeks and over the next couple of months. So for today, we do have a very special guest, and I do want to remind you that we do accept questions live during the show. We already have some questions that we got ahead of time, but if you want to go to the chat function down at the bottom, you can enter in questions kind of as we're going along. I'll try and read them and work them into our conversation. But without further ado, Dr. Hartman, if you want to introduce our even more special guest tonight, go ahead.
Well, our star is a special friend, Dr. Michael Rich, who is also known as the Mediatrician, who we worked collaboratively with on learning a lot more about social media and assisted in the development of surveys and toolkits for the social media program for them. Dr. Rich is an associate professor of pediatrics at the Harvard Medical School, associate professor of social and behavioral sciences at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and practices adolescent medicine at Boston Children's Hospital. He's a pediatrician, researcher, and a father of 4, and a filmmaker. He founded and directs the Center on Media and Child Health and the first evidence-based medical program addressing physical, mental, and social health issues associated with digital technology, as well as the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders. He is an amazing person, brilliant, highly creative, and a lot of fun to talk to. So, and let's also, when you get a chance, go back to your emails, and we're going to send it again, is the Digital Wellness Guide that we think will help you through these difficult times with dealing with social media and screen times with families. So without further ado, Joe and Dr. Rich.
All right, thanks, Dr. Hartman. I think it's kind of ironic we're here sitting in front of 3 different screens on social media, talking about digital wellness and all that. So let's get right into it. I have the Family Digital Wellness Guide right in front of me, and hopefully some of the patients do as well, since we sent it out beforehand. But why don't you give us just a brief introduction to the people who haven't seen it yet about exactly what it is and what you're trying to achieve by having parents look at it.
Well, we originally approached this essentially as a Dr. Spock for the digital age. Dr. Spock's famous childcare book, it was simply called Infant and Childcare, and it followed the life of the child from moving target is the change in all of our behavior because we're carrying these things around all the time. And just look at people on a bus or in an elevator back in the days when we could be in elevators and buses. And no one looks at each other, greets each other, interacts with each other anymore. We're all busy staring at our phones. And so we really felt that what parents needed, particularly in an environment where the public discourse has been really for 50 years about screens being either good or bad, that it was really about a values-based thing. We called it the idiot box or the boob tube. Now we have to recognize that we can no longer take a Luddite approach of just get rid of the screens. We have to live with these screens. We have to work with them, produce with them, communicate with them. And our kids need to learn to be functional in this world. And so we want to move away from what is still a very polarized adversarial debate about children and screens and how they should have screen time limits and all of this, and move into a place that approaches it much like we approach nutrition, which is let's get the science. Let's understand how we are affected by the media we consume. It's like we figure out how we're affected by the food we consume and give that information to parents to make their best decisions. Just like we won't ever say, don't ever take your children to Mickey D's, we will tell you the difference between a Big Mac and broccoli. And we will trust and respect parents to make the best decisions they can with that information in mind. And so that's what the digital family digital wellness guide is all about. It really follows the arc of childhood from infancy right through adolescence. And in each stage, talks about what's going on with development, how it interacts with the screens in their lives, and then some science-based tips on both how to use these media in positive ways, but also potential problems that could arise and how to deal with them, including right up to and including what we call icebreakers, which is how do you start those difficult conversations, either with your sullen teenager who you're trying to get to stop playing Fortnite and go to bed, or even grandma or grandpa who turn the television on and let the baby stare at it for hours. So how do you tackle those difficult conversations in ways that are positive and nurturing and supportive of the child's success rather than policing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to go back to something that you said right at the beginning, which was we live in a different world now, but I think we live in even more of a different world now ever since COVID. And, obviously this guide came out, before COVID. So what have you seen just in your work that has changed, over the past, 3 months or so?
Well, interesting. It's a mix, as you know, but we can talk further about. We also have a specialized clinic at Boston Children's Hospital, the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders, or CIMAID as its acronym spells, which is Aid for Your Simulated Life, because it's for those kids who really have problems with gaming or social media, even pornography, and what we're calling information binging, which is the endless Netflix or YouTube videos or just constant autoplay of one bit of information after another. And what we are seeing, of course, is that many more parents are saying, "Oh my God, my kids really got a problem." But what we're seeing really is not that the problem has increased in prevalence now that everybody's locked down, but that now that parents and kids are all in the same space, frankly, fighting over bandwidth so they can do what they want to do, the parents see it really, and they didn't really see it before because the kids were either out of the house at school or they were checked out doing their homework or playing Minecraft in the back room. So I think that the on the face of it, this is a worse problem since the lockdown. I actually, being a pediatrician, am very optimistic about it, however, in the sense that, um, you know, previous to COVID, kids really saw the internet or the interactive media space as a playground, as a place to run away from parents, from whatever else they're doing, homework, whatever, and game or go on social media or just mess around in various ways. Now that they have had to use it for school, for play dates, for connecting with people, communicating with people, getting things done. They are all starting to shift their relationship to it from just a pure playground to the powerful tool that it is, and I think that's a good thing. And another good thing, quite frankly, is after about 4 hours of Zoom classes, these kids don't want to be on screens anymore. So in many ways, they're naturally sort of burning out on it, whereas before it was like chocolate cake, a treat that you couldn't get too much of.
Yeah, and a lot of the questions that we're getting and that we got in advance from some of the parents in the practice is how to set limits on screen time. But I think that question is changing constantly as maybe kids aren't having classes as much anymore as summer approaches. So how do you, first of all, how do you even put a number on hours for screen time? I feel like that's a difficult question in itself, but how do you limit screen time when now there's different types of screen time? There's screen time that's necessary versus screen time that's more recreational right now.
Well, I'm going to say something really controversial, and that is that even before COVID, the concept of screen time limits was obsolete. I study this stuff, and I couldn't possibly tell you how many hours of screen time I have a day. We really move seamlessly in and out of online and offline environments. It's not like we used to sit down and watch a TV show for an hour or for 2 hours. And the concept of screen time limits didn't work for a number of reasons, even in the days of television. First of all, the recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics was 1 to 2 hours of quality educational screen time a day, which meant that not only was it a screen time limit, but parents needed to figure out what was quality and what was educational. And of course, all the marketers knew instantly that if you could slap the label educational on it, the parents would buy it. But here's what it did is it made screen time the forbidden fruit. So kids would come home from school, and the first thing they'd do is get in front of the screen for their 1 hour. And at the end of that hour, what would happen? Absolutely nothing. So an hour and 15 minutes comes and mom or dad comes and says, hey, you got to get homework done, whatever, go outside and play, do something else. And so it became a conflict every single time. And so what we say is that, and what we feel that the research shows, and actually in clinical practice, it works better, is that while screen time limits really don't work, it's important to limit screen time. But the way you do it is not by setting a time limit on the screen time, but understanding what it's displacing, understanding what you're not doing because you're doing it. And the way to do that is to sit down with your child, and this can be done with somebody even as young as 4 or 5, and think of their 24-hour day. And you get this many hours of sleep, absolutely essential, single most powerfully affected aspect of a child's life by screens is sleep, both the quantity and quality of sleep. So this much screen time, this much sleep, you want them to get to bed at a regular time every day and wake up at a regular time. That is usually enforced by when they have to get up for school anyway. But it's really important for the kids' circadian rhythm, their day-night biorhythm, really, to stay on a regular schedule. And that's one of the things that's gotten really disrupted during the lockdown, is that kids are staying up late and sleeping late, and they don't know what's day and what's night anymore. And it's actually contributing to a great deal of anxiety. So figure out how much sleep. let's get, time for school or school work if, you're doing it remotely from home. Let's decide what they like to do for fun, for physical activity, shooting hoops or, kicking a soccer ball around or whatever.
Right.
They have this much time for homework. Sit down family meal at least once a day, single most protective thing you can do, not just for their nutrition, but for their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've figured out, how they want to schedule out those essentials, see how much time is left. And you're doing a couple of things here. You're switching it from limiting something special to putting it in the mix of experience that they have during the day, and you're giving it to them so they can prioritize, and they can think it through, not just as something to do, but when they're going to start it, and perhaps most importantly, when they're going to end it, so that they go in a planful way. Because most of these screen media, whether it be social media or games or Netflix, are designed to keep you in that environment and lose track of time, because that's how they make their money. And so what you're doing there is teaching your child, first of all, that time and attention are really valuable, and they need to respect their attention and their, what they're putting their time into. Secondly, that they can take control of this, and that they are essentially ceding control to someone else if they, just kind of flick on the screen and let it go. Mm-hmm. But also you're teaching them time management, which God knows we could all do better, right? So it's and frankly, that's a good thing to be aware of when we're using media, that we should manage our time as a model for the children.
Yeah. One of the things that you just talked about that I think is very important, a lot of people struggle with it, is bedtime, and creating that bedtime routine and how it can really affect sleep. What do you recommend? Do you recommend that people maybe even sometimes leave their phone in a different room, or especially some of these kids? Because, I feel like they're going to be looking at it regardless of what you do,
Right. So a couple of things. Number one is they should always charge their phones in the kitchen or mom and dad's room or something like that. And that they should have a time when all screens go off. That's at least an hour before they actually go to bed. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of which is, it allows them to start the slowdown process into drowsiness and sleep latency. But also that when they are staring into a screen, even one that has these so-called yellow light, apps, that they are staring into early morning light that suppresses melatonin, the sleep hormone. And we want to let the sleep hormone happen so that they can ease into sleep in a regular way. So, we recommend all screens off at least an hour before, all charged somewhere else. And you're going to get a lot of pushback from kids, particularly teenagers, saying, I've got to have my phone because my friends depend on me, et cetera. Have them tell their friends that they are offline as of 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever time you decide. And blame it on you as the parent. Say, I've got the strictest parents in the world. They're terrible. But because there is an expectation in friends that they're going to be available 24/7 otherwise, and that they attribute qualities of the relationship to, I texted you 17 seconds ago. Why did it take you so long? And so I think that it's really important to understand how the texting and the constant communication figures into the way they build relationships and build their, tribal societies of high school and et cetera. And to interrupt that by being, sort of a deus ex machina, to come in from outside and say, look, it's all off at 8 o'clock. I can't help it. I have got the meanest dad and mom in the world.
What about morning routines? So if they're not keeping the phone in the bedroom, is it still? Do you think it's appropriate to set limits in the morning too, or they need to have some sort of a schedule that doesn't involve waking up and immediately running to check their social media and all that?
I'm gonna make this into a twofer. First of all, I think we have to really rethink the words we use around this. I push back against the word appropriate. Because appropriate is a values laden word. What's appropriate for one person is not appropriate for another person. Um, and what I really want to look at is words like optimal. What is developmentally optimal, or what is functionally optimal? Because that's what we really want to do, is to make this all work well and development work well, but also the morning routine. So what I would say is, again, prioritize the things that have to happen, like get up, eat breakfast, brush your teeth, put on clothes, take a shower, whatever, and make sure you get done what you need to get done. And if there is time in that, then they can look at it. But face the facts, they can also check their phones on the school bus ride, or in the ride in the car to school, or the walk to school, or whatever. Although I don't really encourage staring at your phone while walking. Distracted walking is as dangerous as distracted driving. But no, but I think that this is really around function and how well can you function. And, this is a bit of a tangent, but one of the things that, sort of plays into that is the belief that they can do two things at once, that they can check their social media and brush their teeth at the same time. Or they can, have a conversation with you and be looking at, memes. The reality is the human brain is a single track. The human brain only does one thing at a time. What we are doing when we think we are multitasking is split tasking. We are jumping back and forth between thoughts. What that means, though, is that while we may be covering a lot of territory, we're not thinking deeply and absorbing and really reflecting on what we're doing. So this is the distracted conversations where the kids are going, yeah, whatever. And, you're saying something like, did you know that, so-and-so got arrested last night? Yeah, whatever. So I think that we have to disabuse ourselves first of the notion that we can multitask. And then and help our kids understand that. And it's one thing when it's getting their teeth brushed. It's another thing when it's doing homework. And there's actually good research on kids doing homework with a television on in the background, or with multiple windows open on their computer and instant messaging and all this. And what's really interesting is that research that's been done with pretty smart college students, like Stanford or MIT students, who were, very into multitasking and very good at it. What they discovered is when they compared them doing homework, just doing homework, versus doing homework with a screen on, or with texting going on, or even with music going on, that the time it took them was increased, that the mistake rate went up when they were multitasking comparatively. And most interestingly, perhaps, is their retention rate of what they remembered, of the ground they covered, dropped dramatically. And so, I think that what we can help kids understand is that they will do their homework better and faster, and then be able to really concentrate on texting people or watching a television show or whatever it is. And it will improve both the quality and the speed with which they do that work.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We lost you. I can't hear you, Lester.
Oh, there you are. You're scaring me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And here's the other thing that's good about it. Not only is it good that it brings you together at certain times of the day, but it allows you to be apart without guilt the rest of the time, right? And quite frankly, teenagers in particular need to be away from their parents and younger siblings and all of that. They just need that time, and to kind of be on top of them all the time, or sort of hovering or around. Really does not. First of all, it annoys the hell out of them. But second of all, it doesn't allow them to exercise the autonomy that is their developmental task at that place in life. I heard one mom said to me, and the mom's an academic, and was on a sabbatical for a semester, and her daughter said, "You know what? I need a sabbatical from you." Right? And so she would take 4-hour sabbaticals in the afternoon, and it really worked nicely.
So how do you balance that now with so many people working from home and trying to model, I guess not model, but like you said, optimal screen time, where the kids see the parents on their laptops all day. And I think the other part that's hard, that I even see with patients and some of the nurses that we have working from home, where the kids aren't used to seeing the parents available all day. And so it's tough for them to see them there, but not be able to interact with them the same way that they're used to when they're home. Because usually when they're home, they're free to, just be parents and hang out with them the same way that they usually do.
Well, what's interesting is not only are they used to seeing the parents at home all day, but they're not used to seeing their parents at work, right? And so what we've needed to do is create our own internal structures of work time and play time. And the other thing that we've been sort of bad about, the adults have been sort of bad about, is letting work bleed into our time with our kids. Checking emails, when we're sitting around the dinner table, or check, whatever. And so we have to be more disciplined about working when we work and not working when we don't work, and it needs almost a ritual around it, like close the laptop, turn it off, and really focus on kids, but also to help them rediscover the things that we've sort of forgotten about, like a family sitting around and playing a board game, or just playing with, taking the dog for a walk. And we've sort of turned everything into screen time versus chores in a way, and we need to sort of rethink and reinvent the time we are spending together. And as parents, we've got to pay attention to the fact that these kids aren't going to be young for very long. And we are wasting precious time with that 4-year-old or that 6-year-old, or God forbid, that 14-year-old that we've allowed to say, I want to check out, and they've checked out, because they really still do need us. And believe it or not, although they'll never confess, they want us. They want us in their lives. And we are still the most powerful influencers of them, despite the influence of the screen. And so they need us in their lives, but they need us to be attentive when we're with them.
I do have one question that, I noticed on your website yesterday when I was looking through some of the things. It looks like you released a guide specifically for summer 2020. What do you want to tell the audience just about how you think the summer is going to go, and especially how going into next fall, how that might look?
Oh my God, do you think I have a crystal ball?
Well, We're getting a lot of questions about that, so I think they expected to have one.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, here's the thing. I don't claim to be prescient and know what anything's going to be like. I do know that for the most part, this is going to be a very different summer than we have had recently, in the sense that most summer camps are closed. Most of the kind of external structured activities are not around. But think about it. This is what summer was like for kids up until about 20 years ago, right? Summer was, hey, wide open, get on your bikes and ride, see what kind of, things you can explore, what you can do. And so this might be, it's Thursday. We could do Throwback Thursday. This may be Throwback Summer, this may be the chance to, run away. I ran away to the mountains of New Hampshire in mid-March and have been conducting my medical practice from here virtually the whole time. And I go out and I hike in between, sessions. I've been planting trees. I've been, doing some really sort of back to basic stuff. And, it's really centering. And so I think this might be a great opportunity for kids to, first of all, be kids again. Back in the day, parents would, kick the kids out the screen door in the morning and say, "Don't come back till dinner," right? And they'd be okay. But we've now built a society that is, first of all, very planned and synthesized and organized, but also very fearful. Like, oh my God, what happens? What can happen to them out in the woods, or what can happen over there? And so I think that maybe this is a chance this summer for kids to learn to climb trees again, to do things. And yes, you can break your arm climbing a tree, but I'd rather I can fix a broken arm. I can't fix a broken spirit, and that is, I think, what we really want to recapture, if we can, this summer, is how do we find childhood in an unstructured way, right? Mm-hmm. How do we get to that without camps telling us how to do it?
And the old concept of sandlot baseball, and when I've never enjoyed sitting in my backyard more than in the morning and listening to the birds and seeing just a simple nature, as literal as it is, and learning all the bird songs and which birds say that and do it. And I just think that's, I'd love to be at the mountains, but right now I'm here.
Right. But think of all the years those bird sounds were happening and you never paid attention to them.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. And so that's the chance to rediscover stuff like that and to really appreciate it. It's also a chance for kids to daydream. One of the things I know, Lester, you've heard me say, is I think we have to bring back boredom, because boredom is where creativity and imagination happen. Not just because it's empty space that needs to be filled, but because that empty space is a little uncomfortable. So you look at the clouds and you make shapes out of them, or you do the what ifs. You get a bunch of scrap wood and start nailing it together into some thing, and I really think, for example, there's some wonderful books out there. I don't know if you've seen The Dangerous Book for Boys and The Dangerous Book for Girls. Wonderful books about things like, how do you make a bow and arrow, right? All the things that we're going, oh my God, you'll get hurt doing it, right? This is what childhood used to be like, right? And yeah, kids got hurt, but we have now so controlled childhood in many ways that we haven't given them the opportunity for the aha moments, for the fun stuff. And even interestingly, it's interesting you brought up Sandlot Baseball because, Sandlot Baseball wasn't about becoming a Major League Baseball player. Sandlot Baseball was about building a society. It was, how do you choose up teams, and who, was I out or was I safe? Did you tag me or not? It's negotiating, it's argument. Sometimes it gets to fist fights and all that stuff. And interestingly, one of the things that I'm discovering, and here's a unique to COVID thing, is that even something like Fortnite, which everybody's going, oh my God, these kids are all spending hours and hours playing Fortnite. When I talk to my patients about playing Fortnite, they don't talk about winning the game. They don't talk about beating other people. They talk about it as hanging out with their friends. They talk about it as developing teamwork and strategy and doing stuff like that together. And it's not unlike what Sandlot Baseball was, which is, how do you choose up teams? How do you work together? How do you resolve conflict and all of this stuff? And so I think we have to go a little easier on the things that are available in the COVID era, and understand that Fortnite is not just about, the Hunger Games online, which is in fact the way it's set up, right? You throw 99 people on an island and the last person standing or the last squad standing wins. But it's really about, the little microcosm of society that's going on and that they're working out. And beware of the language you will hear when your kid is playing this game, because and it's usually at very high volume, and because they have headphones on, you don't hear the other side of it. So it really does sound like your kid's having a psychotic break.
Oh boy! But back to the outdoor, outdoor and nature and all that. We did have a question come in live from the audience. How do we allow kids to rediscover nature and outdoor play without allowing playmates? So I think, touching on social distancing and all the other guidance around that.
Okay, I'm gonna make this into a 2 for 2. Forgive me, Joe. I hate the term social distancing, because what we really need to do for medical reasons is physical distancing, but we need to be socially connecting. And when we're socially distancing, I think we've already socially distanced because we've allowed these devices to be between us. And we have mistaken connectivity for connectedness. And we need connectedness with each other more than ever. In fact, when I go out and I see people not wearing masks, I see that as a symptom of poor social connectedness, because they don't care enough about everybody else to protect other people by wearing a mask. And obviously, it's become politicized and all of that. That's all very ridiculous. But I think that it's really important that we think about physical distancing while socially connected. Now, how do you go outside? I mean, being 6 feet apart from each other is better than having a mask on. And hiking, you can be 6 feet. You usually are 6 feet or more apart. There are many things you can do. You can swim. You can't dunk each other and play chicken in the pool. You can swim and you can play volleyball in the pool, and be socially distant. So I think it's just really a matter of doing these things and remaining conscious of the potential for infection. The other thing is, as we move toward the new normal, people can start to increase the size of their pods. There's the family pod, but there are also people who, you can spend time with. So one of the things that my 14-year-old son did up here in New Hampshire is he started working at a sheep farm, and was there during lambing season and was learning all about animal biology without calling it science, without having classes or any of that. And, even though at first we wore masks, after 2 weeks, they were part of the pod. The folks at the sheep farm were part of the same pod. They were, a family themselves. And so I think we can also, in very conscious ways, expand our connections. And do things well. I think that we have to be very conscious of the fact that something that was already happening long before COVID is something that Richard Louv coined as nature deficit disorder. And kids really suffer from nature deficit disorder. And we are in part responsible for that because, we sort of said, don't get dirty, Purell yourself from head to toe and this, that, and the other. But, so kids see nature not as a network that they're an integral part of, but as something alien, and something to be at best observed from a distance and avoided and protected from. And I think that that's been caused great harm for kids because I think nature is calming and centering, but also quite implacable. You can't whine your way out of a thunderstorm. You're going to get wet if you don't get a tent up or whatever. And so I think that we need to make a conscious effort to rejoin the ecology that we are part of.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I remember I had a lot of illness as a kid, so I stayed at home a lot. But the one thing that happened was my first grade teacher required us to have a hobby and to report at the end of the summer what we had done. And that hobby became pretty close to a lifetime hobby. My father was a geologist, but also I wanted to, most people don't know what this is, but I wanted at one point to be a malacologist. And a malacologist is somebody who studies modern seashells. And for years, by the time I was in fifth grade, I had 300 shells labeled and classified in cabinets my father built. And, that's always stuck with me. And, I feel my diagnostic skills are better because I looked at visual patterns so much, skin rashes versus the pattern on his shell. And I think that made a big difference in my life, learning these things. And then having a book where when we went to a beach, we checked off each thing in the book, that the birds, the flora, the fauna, the shells, all that. And it was a project that was a lot of fun, an enormous amount of fun. And while kids play sports, organized sports, there's less hobbies. And one thing I think is regaining in a time like this the idea of hobbies that the whole family can support. So, as projects that do, and I've been forever grateful for that teacher for the fact that you were assigned to have a hobby. You pick your hobby, but show what you've done by when you get into second grade.
But here's something else you said that I think was really important. You put the shells in cases that your dad built. So you shared time with him around a project, around, it wasn't like, let's spend time together. Let's spend quality time together. You were doing something, And I remember, as a kid, my dad got an old VW engine. I don't know where he got it. And we had it in the basement and we took it apart, and we were covered with grease and, I had no idea where this nut came from or whatever. But it didn't I didn't end up being a good mechanic. But what I did is had time with my dad, and had time not when we're saying let's have a talk or let's do something together. And I think that one of the there's a big difference between, for example, sandlot baseball and organized baseball. Mm-hmm. And part of that is that you have to create that structure. You have to create the relationships in it. And the other thing is we've gotten crazy with organized sports. Kids are specializing in a sport when they're 6 or 7 years old now and saying, no, I don't play soccer anymore. I only play baseball, or whatever. And, of course, it's leading to some injuries, kids who are trying to throw a fastball when their bones aren't fully formed, and ending up with Tommy John surgery at age 16, which is ridiculous. But it's also, look at how the parents are involved. The parents aren't sharing it. The parents are sort of like stage parents. They're sort of on the sidelines saying, "Yeah, kill him, go, 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 go," right? And there's, it's become very tribal rather than communal, I guess, is a way to think about it.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you, and it actually kind of ties in a question that we got from the audience as well. Personally, I mean, when you were both telling your stories about your dads, I thought about mine as well. When I was a kid, we used to spend a lot of time outside doing gardening and yard work and all that. But I also grew up in a time when there was video games and there was a lot of distractions. But the difference with the distractions when I was a kid was they weren't so portable. So the cell phones weren't really as popular yet, and the handheld video games and all that. So the difference was, if I was inside, I had the distractions, but if I was outside, I really couldn't take them with me. But what we got from the audience was something kind of along the same lines, where is it a better idea to have almost multiple devices and have some devices dedicated for like recreational play and then some dedicated for workplace? So they know if they're sitting at this computer, it means work, and if they're sitting at this one, then it means you can have not a free-for-all, but you can do as you please.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, it's obviously only a question that someone who's affluent enough to have multiple devices can ask, right? And I think that we have to realize that. I think something that could, that would structure to a certain degree, but something that anyone can do is what we call mindful media use. In other words, you go to the device, whatever device it's on, to do a certain thing with an intent to do it and an intent to complete it and then move on to something else. So it's about having a start time and an end time, or I'm going to play one game and then I'm going to go outside and shoot baskets. Or so it's really more about respecting one's time and one's attention, one's focus, to enough to choose well how we spend that time. And, one of the things that drives me nuts, not just about the way we use screens, but in general, is the concept of killing time, right? Because time is all we get, folks. Time is really valuable, and we are on this earth for a finite amount of time, and we should spend it in ways that are meaningful and sustaining to us, to those we love. And so one of the things actually that is an exercise that not everyone will try, but interestingly, the people who I find are most inclined to try it are people who are either in the tech industry or the entertainment industry, is the concept of a digital Sabbath. One day a week where the whole family has everything turned off. And people look at me like I'm absolutely bonkers when I say it, That they don't recognize is the fact that it wasn't so very long ago that we had Sabbaths, we had long periods of time with no devices on, many of us wrote our college papers on typewriters, for God's sakes, right? And here's the thing about the Sabbath. First of all, the Sabbath is a concept that has been around forever and is really global in nature. Virtually every culture has some aspect of a day in which you put worldly cares aside and you focus on what's important within and around you. But in this particular environment, we are so hyper-stimulated. We are so constantly poked by stuff and constantly, being informed and responding and reacting, that we're at this high level of tension, anxiety, attention all the time. And it's really interesting what happens when you turn it all off. First of all, it's the families that try it come back and say, wow, the first day we did it was absolutely excruciating. It was so hard. The second day we did it, it was liberating, right? That we didn't feel like we had to jump, or we didn't have to wonder what was going on, because all of our friends knew that we were not reachable, that we were not, and so that's why in particular, I say about with the kids and the phones, let their friends know, tell their friends that they are offline, and blame it on the parents, but tell them that they're offline, because that removes the sense of I am failing somebody who's depending on me. And the same thing happens. And the other thing that happens with these families, they come back and they say, we went for a walk for the first time in like 10 years, my husband held my hand. It's like, oh my God, all these things that, that used to be part of the fabric of life that we've kind of forgotten because we're so busy avoiding boredom and filling that space with memes and news and games and Candy Crush,
Yeah. No, that's such a good point, and I think it's I've tried just to do it for an afternoon sometimes, and I can imagine doing it for a day is hard, but I can also see by day 2 you probably can already start to get used to it,
Yeah, it's actually quite liberating.
Yeah.
And I think, the thing I've discovered, I've done silent retreats before. And I think one of the key things is learning how, if I can't talk, my brain slows down quite a bit, and my brain I don't have to think about the next piece of the conversation. And I can hear, when I've done retreats, I can hear people's footsteps and tell the difference between who's who. And I can tell who's hungry because their stomach gurgles in a quiet room. And it's just amazing. And I affirm what you say, Michael, that whole concept of the first day is hard as heck.
Yeah.
And I went on a 7-day retreat one time, and second day I was nuts. By the third and fourth day, I was starting to slow down. I felt like maybe I could be like Thich Nhat Hanh, and so I do think that lowers your set point. And if you don't talk as much or you don't do screen time, your mind slows down.
Yeah, and but in a positive way. I kind of thinking of it not as slowing down so much as clearing out.
Yeah,
and it's almost like giving some space, breathing in some fresh air. And some people formalize it in the terms of meditation, for example. And a lot of times, kids come to me and they have problems falling asleep, and part of it is teaching them to slow down and get ready for sleep, but also how to clear your mind and how to sort of create some open space so that you can, breathe deep and sort of let go of all that stuff, which is not going to go away just because we worry about it.
Right. I don't want to take too much more time, but I do have a couple. Just do these rapid fire, couple questions.
Okay. Yeah.
That we're getting. 20-year-old that's home from college and is spending so many hours after work every day playing video games. Any quick advice for the parent of how to approach that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. The 20-year-old is, home from college where she or he was, on their own, basically had made their own decisions. So it's a little hard for both the parents and the kids, to re-enter a situation where, in a sense, it's regressing to being a high school student and parents telling them what to do. I would actually say offer alternatives. Offer to do things together with him or her. Come up with things. Let's go out to dinner. I mean, when you used to be able to do it, but you can do it. You can eat outside now in some restaurants, and as things are opening up a little bit. But come up with things to do, because interestingly, when I get these kids in the clinic and I talk to them, they actually acknowledge that they get bored after a while. But they keep getting hooked back in because the games are designed that way. And so if we can create an alternative that is as interesting and is, to our mind, what healthier, like, going out and, knocking a baseball around the field or, walking the dog or whatever. I think that is the best solution, is something, something else to do. And one of the things that I would say is that this is one of those hard talks. It's hard to have with kids. And one of the recommendations in the Family Digital Wellness Guide is how to talk about these things. And the best way to do it is go drive somewhere, because you're not having to face each other. You don't have to look at each other. You're facing straight ahead and you're strapped in, so you can't really do it. And you can talk about things that are much more difficult to talk about in that configuration than when you do the let's sit down and have a talk, thing.
Right.
I think that's great, because the one way I learned about my kids best is when I was driving one of them and a friend.
Right.
And it was almost like I didn't exist. And I would learn so much just by hearing them talk. And it was just amazing that I would never hear if I asked those questions. How's your day? Fine. But when they were in the back seat,
I recall driving back from a soccer game with 3 boys, 2 of whom had same-sex parents. 2 males, 2 females, and 1 who had opposite sex parents. And they argued in a very kind of thoughtful way the pros and cons of each of those configurations.
Wow.
Sort of interesting.
That's amazing.
And it had nothing to do with sexuality. It had to do with, God, it's a drag to have 2 dads because they're always wanting to, right? And moms are better because they're like this, but then they want to do what? And it was hilarious. And I just, it was all I could do to pretend I was not listening.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot.
Absolutely.
I do just have one more question. So what do you do for the kids that kind of figure out ways around some of these things? If you're setting limits, or say they figure out ways like to get around any parental controls or things like that. We have a lot of parents asking about, their kids are probably better at some of these things than they are. And they find all these loopholes. What do you do in that situation?
Well, this is a classic example to loop back to our discussion about screen time limits, but also to our discussion about the words we use. I personally, despite what Apple and everyone say, I really dislike the term parental controls. There is no kid on the face of the earth who wants to be controlled by their parent or anybody else. What I think we should be talking about is parental engagement, parental involvement with the kids. And so, as Lester said, play the game with them, because as soon as you put controls in place, whether they be technical or rules or expectations, they are programmed to hack the system. They are programmed to work around it. This is part of their biological imperative to seek autonomy, right? And so instead of making it about, this is bad, don't do more than this, make it more about valuing their time, valuing their friendships, valuing their, what they do, their activities, and think about the things that those behaviors are displacing. I say to kids who get caught up in social media, social media is fine, but you can't make out with a smartphone, right? I mean, so I couldn't have done that while you were taking a sip, Lester. But it's really true, is to really think about what they're doing. And that's what I mean about mindful media use. Going to the screen with an idea of what we want to do with it, where we want to get with it, and when we are done that, moving on to the next thing.
Mindful media use. I love that.
That's a great point.
I love that.
And I think everything really that we talked about today is something that the parents can reference in the Family Digital Wellness Guide, which I definitely want to encourage everyone to look at. We did post it. If you look down below, it should be the pinned comment, so it's right at the top of this video. And when we post this video again, so people can watch it in the future, it'll also live up there in a link. But is there anything else you want to touch on, Dr. Rich? I really enjoyed having you on this show, and I know all of our patients did as well. This has been really, really educational and really fun.
Well, I think the most important thing is to do the sign off. I do always at Ask the Mediatrician, my online advice column and podcast for raising healthy, happy, kind kids in the digital age, which is enjoy your media and use them wisely. That these are not bad things. These are good things. They are the ways in which we laugh together, we cry together, we communicate with each other, and let's enjoy them and treasure them and respect them enough to know that they're not something to fill empty space. They are something that is an active interaction with another person or with a piece of art, whether it be cinema or music or whatever. But value that and use it well, but don't use it to the exclusion of other things, because what we ultimately owe ourselves and our children is a rich and diverse menu of experience.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Hartman. Thank you as well. It's always a pleasure having you on with me. We do have another show scheduled for next week. I don't want to release just yet what it's about because we have so many great topics that we got from the audience that we are still picking exactly what the topic's going to be. So stay tuned via email for that, but we will be doing a show next week, that's for sure. So thank you everyone again for tuning in. This has been a great third episode, and we look forward to doing more. Probably going to go take a walk outside now after all of our discussions about nature.
And please make all our website and all our resources available to your patient families.
Well, we will.
Yes, absolutely, we will. So we'll be sending out a follow-up email after this with all this information. So thank you again, Dr. Rich, Dr. Hartman. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. So are we cutting this out, or can we talk a few minutes?